everyone, welcome to today's episode of Startup Talk, the weekly live show for entrepreneurs and startups. And today we're talking about doing things differently, getting financial clarity, and finding your funding. Now, for those who are new to the show, in Startup Talk, we connect with other like-minded entrepreneurs and startups to share our experiences, best practices, lessons learned, wins and frustrations, so we can all learn from each other and grow together. My name is Saskia. I am your weekly host for Startup Talk, and I'm an entrepreneur myself. I help people turn their passion into a thriving business. And every week, I welcome a new guest to the show, and we discuss a weekly topic of his or her choice. This can be anything, as long as it's related to entrepreneurship and starting up a business. Now, Startup Talk is live every Thursday at 7 o'clock in the evening, Central European Time, so this time, on the Facebook and YouTube account of the Startup Suite. Make sure to never miss an episode by liking this video and following the Startup Suite on Facebook. And if you're watching this from YouTube, hit that subscribe button and make sure to turn on notifications so you get notified whenever we go live. And as said, this show is live, which means you can join the discussion and share your thoughts and comments using the comment sections. So don't be shy. I love to hear your thoughts on whatever we're discussing. Now, let's go to our guest. It's a great pleasure to introduce the guest of today. He has spent quite some time in the accounting industry and then decided it was time to do something differently. So he decided to travel the world while helping entrepreneurs and organizations refine their vision, develop strategies, and assist them to find funding implementing their goals. He's the founder of Crescendo Strategy, and he has his own charity organization called HeartSpark. He has been nominated and won various business awards, including Queensland Small Business Entrepreneur of the Year, Brisbane City Council Entrepreneur of the Year, and the Telstra Business Person of the Year, and the Young Australian of the Year. And when I met him, we had an amazing chat while he was sitting on the beach in Mexico, while here in the Netherlands, it was the typical Dutch weather, meaning it was cold and we had a lot of rain. So it was so nice that he brought in the sun. And today we'll talk about doing things differently and how to find your funding. And I'm very excited about this because I am all for doing things in a way that makes you excited, that gives you that sparkness. And of course, funding, whether it's grants, crowdsourcing, or finding investors, is crucial for your business success. But it can also be very daunting because how do you convince an investor that your company is the right investment? So I'm excited to chat with him today on what it means for him to do things differently and how to find your funding. So please help me welcome to the show, Troy Schoenfish. Hey, Troy.
Hi, Saskia. Nice to be here.
How are you today? Yeah, welcome to the show.
Well.
How are you?
Very well, very well. Nice and relaxed in Mexico.
In Mexico? Where in Mexico are you today?
In Oaxaca, up in the mountains in central Mexico. So yeah, not on the beach in Playa del Carmen anymore. Spent 6 weeks there, now up in the mountains.
Yeah, after seeing the beach for 6 weeks, I can imagine you are in need for some mountains. So yeah, thank you for making some time to be here on the show today.
Absolutely.
So you're an accountant and you're a financial mentor, helping entrepreneurs and startups secure their funding. How did that came to be?
Yeah, so my mother actually said when I was a child I was always going to be an accountant. I just had to wait to grow up and be old enough to get a job. I was always into money and finance and these sorts of things, and just having a natural understanding of how it works, and a bit of OCD helps as well. And then was in banking for a while, and then got into accounting and started accounting sort of in my mid-20s rather than straight out of school after working in a few businesses myself. Did that for about 10 years, which was great. A great training ground and a great area of getting experience and knowledge and exposure to all sorts of different businesses and industries and startups and established businesses. And then worked through in taking a number of director roles in some businesses and stepping out of the compliance and governance side, tax returns and processing of financial transactions in the accounting field. And stepping out and actually applying that in the real world. So moving from public practice accounting into the startup space. So working in startup hubs and incubator hubs working on hackathons and startup weekends and working with people with great ideas to help them build a structure around their idea and how to get money and build a business and be able to start employing staff and get it out there and start making money. And then looking at what they want to do with that money. So some people want to make a lot of money and buy a nice house and a nice car, and that's great. But I found that I really connected with people who wanted to build a business, not just for profit, but also to have an impact. So an innovative idea that's going to change other people's lives, or they want to support or set up a not-for-profit organization for a cause that they believe in, those sorts of things. And so, like you said, a couple of years ago, after doing that for 3 years around Australia, I got on a plane, headed through Asia and Europe, and haven't been back to Australia since. So even in the last 12 months, still traveling around and helping not-for-profits and corporations in Australia and globally with their goals and ambitions and accessing funding and investment. So it's been interesting, but it's been fun.
I bet it's been quite an interesting year, let alone travel through the last year. That must have been quite a journey, so to speak.
Yeah, it has been interesting. I met my partner in February last year in Bulgaria during traveling, and we've traveled to 9 countries in the last 13 months, even throughout COVID. Cautiously, carefully, being able to go where we need to go, socially distant, washing hands, masks, all those sorts of things, definitely, but still going to different places that allow us in, and for the extent that we're allowed to stay in the country, which is about 3 months in most places. And yeah, ended up in America for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and now in Mexico for some sun and sand and ocean and fun. And we'll see how long we stay here for until where we go next.
Yeah, well, that sounds amazing, and especially given that it's still possible, even even despite of COVID, that's just almost a miracle in and of itself. So, at a certain moment, you decided to go to help startups with their funding and their finances. So, what drove you to make that decision? Like, hey, I want to help startups.
So I was working for an accounting firm, a public practice accounting firm. They had a number of clients who were doing research and development work, innovative work. So I became aware of certain tax incentives, certain structurings, certain ways of accessing funding for pre-revenue startup ideas. Like I always say, the best source of revenue, best source of funding is revenue. But if you haven't actually taken a market to product yet, that's a little difficult. So how do you structure things in a way that it's not just an idea that people are funding, but you've got, at what stage do you start looking for funding, spend your own money, spend your own time? So I went from that accounting practice and I started my own business. So I was a startup, and I went into the startup hub as a startup. Of course, as an accountant walking into a startup hub, there was a bit of apprehension. It's like, what is this accountant doing here? Because accountants are very expensive, and they always wear these, the suits, and it's awkward talking to an accountant, and we don't understand what they say, and what are they doing here? Is he just looking for business? And I'm like, honestly, I'm just here doing my thing, and if you have any questions, just ask me. And through being in that space for sort of 12 to 18 months in a number of different startup hubs throughout Brisbane, I kept hearing the same questions come through. Like, Troy, what about this? Can you help me with this? I don't understand that. I spoke to my accountant and I don't understand what he said. Can you explain it to me in English? Which was great, because now when I'm talking to businesses, I can, try and translate between accountants and lawyers and English.
Well, that's already a skill in itself. That's already a skill in itself, just having that translation between what does a lawyer say, what does an accountant say, and how can you benefit from that as an entrepreneur of a startup. That's already quite something.
Yeah, it's simplifying those requirements and simplifying the terminology, and there's so many acronyms when you come into tax and business. There's so many acronyms, like alphabet soup, right?
Oh, that's so recognizable.
Funding as well, funding and investment. Like there's different sources of funding through different levels of government, and each of those levels of government have their acronym for the name of the funding, so that they don't have to say 6 words at a time. They just say the letters, and then add that in with tax legislation and acronyms that are involved there, and then you've got corporate structure. Like, it's just, it can become quite overwhelming. So being able to understand and talk and explain those concepts, and having my own small business as well, I'm going through the same process as these people. I'm defining my processes, refining what I'm doing, building it to what the market and what the customers and the clients are actually needing and missing. And that's the premise of a startup, right? You've got an idea, but does the market want it? What are they going to pay for it? What does it solve? How does it help them? And how do you build a business around that? So it's, whether it's a service business or a product or anything, you are looking at that same process.
Yeah. Wow. I always joke to tie in with your acronyms. I always joke to know your TLAs, your three letter abbreviations, because every company has them, every country has them, every startup has them, but they're different everywhere. So it's like, what are you guys talking about? So that's you have to grow in there, I guess. So you started out in Australia, and I can imagine that Australia has its own sets of rules for funding and what you can do, what you can't do. And then you decided to travel, and you're now helping companies from all over the world. How do you keep up with all the legislation in that?
So that's a really good question, and something that comes up a lot. So I'm a member of a number of Facebook groups for Aussies in France and entrepreneurs worldwide and these sorts of things. And just like when I come, I'm in contact with a business or a person who's developed a new type of technology or an innovative way of doing things, I don't necessarily understand the technical aspects of what they've developed to be able to help them to build the business and the structure around that. So the fundamentals are pretty much standard across the board. Okay, you've got to have a market, like we talked about, so doing market research, then have a go-to-market strategy, and then having an implementation of that. Having your budget of how much you're going to make and how much is it going to cost to develop these things and distribute them. Are you going to have staff? What is your plan? What are you doing? I can get into acronyms and SWOT analysis and PEST analysis again. Yay acronym.
Oh boy.
Who are your team going to be? All of those core elements that are required are universal. So it doesn't matter whether you want to study business in the Netherlands, or you do an MBA at Yale, or you study at one of the Australian universities. They're going to go through those basics. Okay, so it's explaining those concepts and helping people through that process is universal, and I'm working with them all over the world. So also in the not-for-profit space, so you mentioned I have my own not-for-profit, Spark. So that's working with people to say, what is your passion and how do you help make that happen, right? What lights your heart on fire?
Exactly.
Light the spark and then make it happen. I've worked with the KSPCA in Kenya. I've worked with a cat and dog rescue organization in Greece. I've worked with Stand Up for Elephants in Nepal, which is an organization looking at taking elephants out of the tourism trade in Nepal and actually setting up Nepal's first elephant sanctuary because there wasn't one. And working with them through their business plan and their project plans and their timelines and their costings and their experts and all of those elements. It's Nepal. It's a completely different currency. It's a completely different culture. It's a completely different sphere to being a company in America as to a not-for-profit in Nepal. But the fundamentals were the same. Through working with them over the course of about 6 to 7 months, creating all those documents, they were actually able to approach organizations, and within 3 weeks were successfully able to receive funding to rescue another elephant into the sanctuary because of that process. So yeah, the tax laws, the registration, that's why every business that I work with or organization needs to have an accountant and a lawyer in their country that can support them to do the technical compliance legal work and collaborate with them, absolutely. But the fundamentals apply across the board. And it's also whether you're looking for funding through grants, funding through donations or crowdsourcing, as you said, or whether you're looking for investment.
Well, that's exactly something I wanted to ask you. So you can have grants, you can have investments, you can have funding, you can sell a bit of your company, you have crowdsourcing. are there typical recommendations? When would you recommend the one for what kind of company you have or what kind of product you're developing?
So it is slightly different depending upon either the stage of the business, the type of business, or the product or service that's being developed and taken to market. So if it's pre-revenue, if you're looking for funding to help you to develop your product to start with, is a different conversation than an existing business that might have a $1 million turnover that's looking to implement a new product or purchase a new site or manufacturing plant or something to expand. Okay, so it is different, but the fundamentals of what you need to do are the same. So where you go is the conversations you have are different. I have been doing a lot of work over the last 6 months or so, having conversations with people in the venture capital and private equity space. I mean, you mentioned investment and giving somebody equity. What comes across through almost all of those conversations that I have with those people is that they get approached every day by people looking for funding. Of course, right?
I can imagine. I mean, it's like, hey, a venture capitalist on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I have just a pitch for you.
So, but what they're saying is that people are coming to them that are underprepared. So not that they're not prepared, it's not that they have no idea, but they're underprepared for the level of investment or level of support that they're looking for. Like they might have a pitch deck, but they don't really have the business plan or the go-to-market strategy to back up the pitch deck. Or they're applying for funding from them, for investment from them, but the industry that the business is in isn't an industry that fund supports, or they're looking for $200,000 when the fund doesn't write a check for anything under $20 million, right? So research and planning and structuring is really, really important to know where you are, where you want to be, and what are the steps that you need to take to get between the two. Government will generally have some level of support for startup or early stage businesses, but they expect you to bootstrap, lean startup, put your own blood, sweat, and tears into it at the start, get to the point of being a viable product or a viable service, or knowing that it's going to work, have a prototype, have it tested, make sure it works, and have interest from people in the market. And then the key is to look for funding at the right point. So you get to that point and then go, right, now I need to work out how much time, how much money is it going to take for me to get from where I am now to where I want to be? What support, external advisors, technical support, expertise, sales, marketing, whatever it is that you can do and you can't do, bringing those people in, and how much is that going to cost? And then working out a strategy at that point of how are you going to fund that strategy and all those costs and during those timelines that you've just figured out, as a combination of all of those things. Revenue is really important. When are you going to start to make money? But then talking about that to government grant approvals or investors or lending through banks means that's still there as well, or crowdsourcing, as a combination of all of those. So it's really important to get that planning done at the right point. It's very rarely too early, but it can very often be too late. But
I can imagine that. Yeah. Well, one thing, so I've helped some startups, I've launched some projects, stuff like that. And one thing that every time we try to look for grants, for funding, for venture capital, stuff like that, even just a simple form like, hey, tell us about your product, your market potential, your total market, sellable market, your who do you need, what do you need? I often noticed that the team got, and myself as well, got in this huge state of overwhelm, because it's like, I don't know everything, and everything I write down I know is wrong, because it can be more, it can be less, but it's the gut feeling I have right now. So what would you recommend to startups who are just getting started, who don't have So what would you recommend to me, like 2 years ago, when you're just getting started, you have an idea, you have a very rudimental MVP. It's like, hey, this is how it would look a bit. These are the features, but it's not working actually yet. But you get an idea, but I don't have revenue yet, and I'm just trying to find my way through this way of finding funding. What would you recommend me then?
So one of the things that is fundamental, especially with the startup weekends and the hackathons that I was a part of, and that concept of like quick, get it done, is have an idea, have as basic a version as you can, whether it's a website with some basic details or something that shows some specifications or something like that, something very, very basic. Then go out to the market and find people that want to buy the thing. Whatever it is that you've developed, whatever it is that you're trying to sell, make sure that people want this thing and ask them how much they're going to pay for it. Right now, that might take on a startup weekend, you've got about 12 hours to do that. Right. So not intensive, but it feels that way. But in business in general, you take a bit longer, talk to a market research person, find out who can help you to find out that information that you need. And then you've validated the fact that it's worth spending the time and the money to keep going with building this thing or developing this thing, and finding out if there's competition. So finding out if there's somebody else. The number of times people have come into these weekends and gone, nobody else has come up with this. I've got this great idea. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, it's that nobody's figured out how to go to market. Nobody's figured out how to make a sustainable, viable, profitable business from selling and developing this thing. And if you can crack that nut, awesome. But that's different to nobody else is doing anything like this. If somebody can spend 5 minutes on Google and find other people that are doing a similar thing, it reduces the impact of your message. When it comes to actually applying for grants or funding or investment in any source, okay, so this is what I say to people all the time. They say, Troy, can you help me apply for a grant? Yes, I can, but we've got to do all this other work first. Because if you do the other work first, then it doesn't matter whether your funding round is competitive or non-competitive, right? So it's open or it's only specific for some people, or whether there's a 3-day window or a 3-week window, or it's an open, ongoing, rolling source of funding. If you've got the foundations and you've got the documentation and you know exactly what you're trying to do and you've got it completely planned out, you can take that information and apply for any source of funding or any form of investment as a combination of funding to achieve those goals as that funding becomes available. So the secret with actually getting through the process of the application itself, right? So like I mentioned all that stuff because it's all important before you even look at applying for that bit of funding, whether it's $5,000, $50,000 or $500,000, it doesn't matter because they need to know the same information. How much money do you need? What are you going to do with it? What are the outcomes? The thing with government funding, they're not looking for an investment in your business, right? Because they're the government. They don't generally invest in small businesses.
They're not?
No. What they're looking to do is get an impact. So there's a lot of funding available in Australia at the moment for female founders. So they released a lot of funding, which was like $11 million for female founders. That's open for the next month, right? That's specifically to help female founders. They're not after themselves investing. What they wanted to do is support more women to build and start and grow their own businesses, because most businesses are still owned by men or run by men. There's more male directors of businesses than female directors. That number's improving, and this is one of the steps that the Australian government is taking to help support more women to start and build their own businesses and get into leadership and director roles, is to support female founder businesses, right? So when you're looking at applying for that, if I looked to apply for the female founder funding, I'm not going to be that successful, okay? Whereas if you would apply for the female founders funding in Australia, you might not be successful either because you're in the Netherlands and not in Australia. So it's not going to help Australian women to build their business. So you've got
that's going to have a geographical disadvantage. That's true.
Yeah. So you've got to look at the purpose. The purpose of any source of funding from the government is absolutely crystal clear if you know what you're looking for. This funding has been set up for the purpose of achieving these outcomes. So everything that you have to write in your application other than the technical, this is how we do what we do, the answers they're looking for is, how is us putting money into your business going to help us to achieve the purpose of this particular source of funding? So it's not a matter of just apply for every funding that's out there and, you know, hope that you catch something like with a wide net going fishing. It's about being very specific. And if you've got all that development work and all of that documentation done to start with, that's your core, that's your goal. That's about 80% of the work done. And then you're saying in those questions, how does this work that I've done apply for this particular source of funding?
Yeah, it's so recognizable that you have an idea and you're enthusiastic and you're like, oh, I want to get this done. So you don't per se make a plan, but you just start doing something. And then the moment you actually want to bring it out in the world, it's like, wait, you have to do some homework. You need to have a business plan. You need to validate your idea. You need to do your homework. You need to have the fundamentals, because otherwise you're just playing around, and it could be something, but you will never know for sure because you don't have those fundamentals there.
So, and depending on the level of your business, I'm working with a guy at the moment who has developed this technology that can be utilized in the mining industry. And, you know, it basically just replaces something they're already using, which means it reduces the downtime of these machines by, you know, a number of hours per week in repairs and maintenance, which is like a couple of hours, whatever. But when those machines are, like, their productivity is between $15,000 and $30,000 an hour, a few hours every month for every machine, and there's like 300 machines across Australia in this one company alone, becomes big numbers overall, right?
Yeah.
But he's still got to go through, he's pre-revenue, but he's like, okay, this is the market that I'm going to. These are the people that I have to present this to. So even though he's pre-revenue and it's going to be like, I'm just going to sell this thing like in one amount for a big amount to one company, and I'm figuring out who this is, to present it to the different companies that are his potential market, his potential clients, he's got to do all of this work. But there's also a number of government sources of funding that are available to help him through that process. So he's got to do the same work to access that funding. And then there's investors that have heard about this idea. They're like, we want to get involved and we want to give you money to help get this over the line because we know that we're going to make money out of this. Yeah. But we need you to provide all this information to us, and we invest in these type of things. So can you just check all these boxes for us as well? So that's the thing is, doesn't matter what level of business you're in, whether it's small or whether it's going to be a large sale amount, it's targeting, doing the work, and then targeting the responses to the people who are looking to potentially give you the money. Now, how do you word that, which comes back to your question? How do you write that? Like, you've done the work, you've got somebody and you've got the business plan, but is it enough? You know, like, okay, a 3-page business plan is not going to be enough. A 60-page business plan, probably a little too much. Probably ain't nobody going to read that. But yeah, have a business plan. It's like 12 to 18 pages, and then have like a pitch deck that's like an executive summary, really fancy infographic version of the business plan, and going, you know, this is the problem, like the Getty pitch, this is the problem, this is how we're going to solve it, this is what we need from you. But how do you write that? If you don't have experience in writing that, it can be difficult to express what you're trying to say, or to pick out what is the purpose, what are the answers they're looking for. So there are a lot of businesses around that can help people to apply for grants. Like, they can help you. They're familiar with how to write, how to phrase certain things you need to be aware of, and check how to help you to check all the boxes. That's an element of what I do, but it's like the last very final part of what I do. And it's a part of applying for, like I said, investment or looking for lending as well. Yeah. So if you're not comfortable with it, if you're not comfortable with doing a business plan, I would say at least Google business plan, Google SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, because that's a core component of a business plan. Google business model canvas, which has all the different elements in there.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Right. Before you talk to, if you're not comfortable, you don't know how to complete these documents, you're not quite sure how to write the grant application, search for those documents and try to fill them out as best as you can, and then find a source of funding and look at the application process, like the female founders funding in Australia. Like, look at what they're looking for and look at the answers that they're asking, and kind of start thinking and start practicing. Even though you might not be eligible for that source of funding, it might give you a structure that you can follow.
That's a good one.
To try it out and see what it looks like, and then maybe give it to a potential investor, give it to somebody that you know that's in business, that's an accountant or a successful business person, and say, hey, can you look at this for me? And if they come back and they say, hey, that's really close, I can help you out, or they come back and they say, you really need help, then you know your next steps.
Yeah, then you get that feedback and then you can go further from there. And well, today I was browsing through Reddit and I came across the story about Ring. You know, this connected doorbell that it's so you have a doorbell. It's on your porch or on your front door, and it's connected to the internet. So whenever someone rings your ring, then you get a ping on your telephone and you see, hey, this person is standing in front of my door. And I didn't know it, but apparently it got pitched on Shark Tank. And it got declined. They were like, no, I have no interest in funding this. But the guys continued anyway. And after that, they were sold for, I think, millions to Amazon, I think it was. So it was like, and well, the question I want to ask you is actually, I guess a lot of funding requests will get declined. How do you know to keep going, or how do you know when you should stop, or when you should keep going anyway?
So that Ring story is a perfect example, and there's lots of them, right?
There are a lot of them, right?
Somebody didn't pick this up, but somebody else did. You know, like Facebook, and people weren't interested, and Google, people weren't interested, and all these other sorts of things. Like, oh, they're already competitors. There's so many of those stories around. One of the elements is what I was talking about before, with people approaching an investor with an idea, but that investor either doesn't have experience in that industry or that market, or they're not interested in that market. Like, if you want to sell Ring, right, and you go to a biotech investor, they're going to be like, this is not my area of expertise. I'm not comfortable with this. I'm sure it could make money, but it's not in my field. Okay, so there are people called angel investors who are more likely to invest at very, very ideation stage, and will invest in helping you to get an idea over the line. And then there's other investors and institutional investors that will come on board with an established business and an established idea to grow that business rather than to fund an idea. So, and it's different in different areas as well. So America is there are more people that are more inclined to invest in an idea in America.
Really?
Ideas,
so that's a cultural thing. I can imagine there's a difference per country.
Valley, yeah, Colorado. There's areas there, right? In Australia, very, very hard to get somebody to invest in an idea. Like, you've got to show that you've gone to the market, show that you've actually got revenue, show that we're going to invest to help you grow. Very little support from government or investment. It is there. I'm not saying it isn't there, but proportionately. I know I keep talking about Australia, and I apologise, but there are figures from America
Australia.
And
you can talk about it.
Also support this as well. But like, the investment field has been consolidated over the last 5 years. So where the people think, oh, I'll just go to an investor and get money in, the number of deals is reducing. The number of funds is kind of similar, but the value of the deals, of what's being invested, is actually increasing. So they're doing less deals, but they're doing higher value deals because they're expecting people to be more prepared. There was a big push in entrepreneurialism and startups and unicorns and startup hubs and all this sort of stuff about 5 years ago, and it increased. And then people went, we're not really making it. 1 out of 100 is actually getting over the line. We need to consolidate this a little bit more. So it's about going to the right people with your idea and being prepared and having the information and having the responses to have the impact that they're looking to have. With regards to when do you know whether to keep going with an idea or whether to sort of put it to bed, that one's a bit of a a crystal ball moment.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no real metrics other than how much money are you losing and how much time are you spending. That's a pretty good metric.
That's a pretty good
say,
one.
when do I have to start tracking do I have to have an accounting system in place? I'm not making any money yet. I'm like, yeah, but if you're spending money, you need to know how much, and you need to know how much time you've spent, because it might be that might be recoverable if you do get an investor, or the investor might want to know that you have spent how much time and how much money getting it to this point, how much debt's involved in the company, and all these kind of technical financial elements. I would suggest that once you get it to a minimum viable product stage and you test the market in a basic sense, just having undertakings. Yes, I would buy it when it becomes available. Yes, I'm really interested in that. Yes, that would help. And yes, I would pay for it. Right?
That would
Somebody's
already
going to
help
love
so
it.
much.
They're going to love it if it's free. If you're going to make this thing and give it to them for free, absolutely, they're going to be, this is fantastic. But if they have to pay for it, are they going to hand over the cash? And if you keep getting, I don't want it and I wouldn't pay for it, then maybe it's a redesign, or maybe it's a matter of bringing on an expert in that field or that industry that can give you some guidance on what might be needing to change about it to get it to the point. But it could come down to just a gut feel sometimes. I know a guy who was developing technology, integrated farm management systems for crop farming. Huge projects, spent a lot of time, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this thing, and he just got to that point where he's like, I don't have the skill, the expertise, the financial backing to actually get this to where it needs to be, and I could try and keep chipping away at it for the next 3 years, but if it's going to achieve what it's going to achieve and get out there, I just need to sell what I've done up to this point to somebody with deeper pockets and more expertise in those areas that are lacking to get it to that line. And that's what he did. He came to that realization. He started looking at like the competitors, started looking at the market, started having conversations, initiated some conversations. Look, this is what I've done. Would you be interested? Getting involved with non-disclosure agreements and these sorts of things. But he had to make that decision himself. I had suggested that to him about 12 months earlier. But
he's probably emotionally invested, right?
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
To be there. Yeah.
And this is what I've developed. And part of that process of coming to that realization of running a business itself. You're an entrepreneur, you've worked with startups, and you know that the business and the product or the service is different to you as a person. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
They're different. And the idea is an asset, like the intellectual property, the patents, the trademarks, everything, what it is an asset in itself. The business, how you make money, is separate to that. Like they can be two separate things. So you might be good at developing the product, but not great at business. So do you bring somebody in to help you with the business? Or you might be kind of good with the business stuff, but need some more expertise with developing that technology itself. So do you bring those people in, or do you sell it off to somebody as IP? It's a perennial question, and it does a lot of. This is where there are no right and wrong rules. You can do an MBA, you can study entrepreneurship, but really,
you're falling away
in the US, where won't listen to you until you've failed, until you've flopped a couple of times, and then you learn the lessons of, as a founder, you've got to kind of be able to get out of your own way as well, and not be too connected to this is me, as opposed to how do I get this product or this thing or this business off the ground or to the next level.
Yeah, I love that. We had a short audio interruption in there, but I think it came through. I think I completely agree with you. It's I think it's also a gut thing. You have to be there emotionally as well, and it's also about allowing yourself to have failures, to learn, to grow further. And that also reminds me of the discussion I actually had last week, which was about failing fast and failing often and growing from there. And it's so funny to see those topics coming back. One question I also wanted to ask you is, what is one common myth about finding your funding?
Common myth that it's easy to apply for. People see there's so much funding available and they go, I'm going to just apply for it. And then they're like,
going to do it.
That government didn't give me that money, or that person didn't invest in my thing. And what are they thinking? And don't they know how fantastic this is? It probably, like I was saying, we've said a couple of times, like it probably is a fantastic product could be an absolutely amazing idea, but if you're underprepared and you're not asking for the right funding from the right people and expressing your idea and presenting it in the way that they need, then you're not going to your chances of being successful are significantly decreased. Not impossible, but decreased.
Lower.
So
Yeah.
people just go, I'm just going to apply for every source of funding that's out there and just get as much money as I can. The other thing is that funding will pay for stuff. Most funding and investors will actually match funding. So you'll have to have funding available. You still got to have some money left in your pocket. You've still got to be able to contribute, or you've got to have enough revenue coming through to be able to match the amount of funding that you're asking for. Because like buying a house, you go to the bank and you say, hey, can you pay 100% of these costs plus all the fees? They're not likely to say yes. If you're looking for funding or you're looking for investment, it's the same deal. Don't expect that you can go to them asking them to fund 100% of the project. They're only going to be looking at funding up to a certain level. And that'll be in the funding guidelines or the investment guidelines. We'll match up to 50% or up to 80% or something like that.
Well, that's really good to know. So say people listen to this live show and they're like, hey, Troy, I want to know more about you. You have a program coming up, right?
Yes. So I've been developing this over the last 5 years of helping businesses or organizations to get ready to apply for funding or investment. So all of these things that we've been talking about today, so getting investment ready. And it's a support mechanism. So it has the documentation, it has the support. I can help guide through the process, or there's a do-it-yourself version, because some people just want some guidance, like where do I go, what do I need to do? And other people are like, I don't have time to do this, to apply for funding or find out where it is. I don't know how to do it. I've tried and it hasn't gone well. Can you do it for me? So the support is still completely dependent upon what level of support the business owner is looking for and what stage of the business that they're at. But the process is meet you where you are, where do you want to be, and what are the steps between the two.
Okay, but the program is completely customizable to the needs of you as a startup or you as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Say you're like a mechanic, right? He's got a whole shed full of tools. He's not going to use every one of those tools to fix your car. But if your car comes in and needs something, he's probably going to have that in his toolbox. So it's the same principle. All of the resources are there. We have a conversation about what you need, and then we utilize those tools and those resources to help you at whatever level of business you're at.
Okay, sounds good. So if our viewers want to know more about the program or want to know more about you, how can they get in contact with you?
So thankfully, I have a pretty unusual surname. So I have my LinkedIn is my surname. I've got information and videos on there. My website is my full name. There it is.
I linked it here as well, and it's in the description of the video too.
Absolutely. So there's videos on there, there's resources on there. You'll see me doing videos, like short 1 to 3 minute videos from like the coast of Croatia, the coast of Montenegro, I've been here in Mexico and a couple of other places as well, and inside in Serbia. So, I do get around. I am traveling, and I'm still doing this on the road. So there's lots of information there, and you can organize to get in touch either through LinkedIn or through the website and have a chat and say, hey, that was really interesting. I've just got this question. I'm happy to have a chat and answer some basic questions and just help guide some people along that path.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. I really enjoyed our talk. I became a lot more knowledgeable now about how to find your funding and really doing the homework, getting your fundamentals in, and knowing how to align your funding goals with the goals of the call for grants or call for proposal.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you for that. If you want to, as we said, if you want to learn more about Troy and his company Crescendo, check out his website, which we just showed, Troy Schoenfish.com. And I also linked that video in the description. If you liked this kind of content, then make sure to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. You can also do it after we stop going live. Just add them in the YouTube comments. If you haven't done so, make sure to like the Startup Suite on Facebook. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and make sure to turn on your notifications so you get notified whenever we go live. And of course, join me again next week. Then I will be joined by a storytelling copywriter who helps people discover their inner entrepreneur. And we will be talking about outside of the box entrepreneurship ideas. Well, thank you all again for being here today. I hope to see you again next week. And yeah, talk soon. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.